Disclaimer: this is a fictional dramatization created for artistic, emotional, and educational storytelling purposes. All characters and events are entirely fictional and created using AI tools. No impersonation, misrepresentation, or harm is intended. The content contains scenes of danger involving child characters. However, no real persons or minors were involved in its production. Grace's Love Stories produces scripted, AI-generated stories that promote, entertain, inspire kindness, and emotional connection. We respect our viewers and strictly adhere to YouTube's policies.
The morning light shouldn't feel like an accusation, but it did. I opened my eyes to unfamiliar ceiling frescoes, angels and wolves intertwined in gold leaf, their expressions caught between ecstasy and hunting. The sheets beneath my fingers were silk, cool and foreign. Nothing like the worn cotton I'd known all my life. My head throbbed with a dull, persistent ache, and my mouth tasted of champagne I didn't remember drinking. I sat up slowly, and that's when I felt it. The weight on my left hand, a ring. Heavy, ancient-looking, with a stone so dark it seemed to swallow light rather than reflect it. Silver vines wrapped around the band, delicate as lace but cold as a promise I didn't recall making. My heart began to hammer against my ribs. Not the pleasant flutter of surprise, but the wild panic of a bird trapped in a closing fist. Where was I? The room stretched vast around me, all dark wood and velvet curtains the color of dried blood. A fireplace large enough to stand in dominated one wall, cold now, its ashes gray and lifeless. Through windows taller than any I'd ever seen, I glimpsed mountains, sharp, snow-capped peaks that looked like teeth against a pale sky. This wasn't home. This wasn't anywhere close to home. I threw back the covers and realized I was wearing a nightgown I'd never seen before. White silk embroidered with silver thread, beautiful and terrifying in its intimacy. Someone had dressed me. Someone had brought me here. My clothes from yesterday, I struggled to remember yesterday, were nowhere to be seen. My grandmother's voice echoed in my mind, the words she'd pressed into my palm the day before I left for the summit. Clara, my darling girl, remember this. When you're lost in the woods, the only way out is through. Don't freeze. Don't run blind. Look, think, move forward. She'd given me her compass then, the brass one her mother had carried across the ocean. I'd worn it on a chain around my neck for 3 years, a talisman against forgetting who I was. I reached for my throat now. The compass was gone. Panic threatened to choke me, but I forced myself to breathe. Look, think, move forward. I was in a castle. That much was clear from the architecture, the scale of everything. The summit. I'd come to the summit as part of the human delegation, one of 20 young women sent to observe the treaty negotiations between our world and theirs. The Lycans. The wolf people who'd revealed themselves to humanity just 5 years ago, upending everything we thought we knew about the world. I was nobody important in that delegation. Just Clara Ashford, a librarian's assistant from a small coastal town, chosen because I could read old languages and keep my mouth shut. My hair, pale blonde like winter wheat, was the only remarkable thing about me. And even that I'd learned to hide, keeping it braided tight and pinned away. Invisibility had always been my greatest skill. But somehow I'd ended up here. In this room. With this ring. I slid out of bed, my bare feet silent on thick carpet, and moved toward the window. The mountains told me nothing. There were mountains near the summit location. I remembered that much. But these looked wilder, more remote. Below, I could see a courtyard, guards in dark uniforms moving with purpose, and beyond that, forests that stretched endlessly in every direction. A sound made me freeze. Footsteps in the hallway outside, heavy and deliberate, accompanied by voices. Should be awake by now. The effects of the wine don't usually last this long. He said not to disturb her until she woke naturally. A woman's voice, firm but not unkind. Naturally, she drank enough to knock out a full-grown male. Stupid human tolerance. Watch your tongue, Garrett. She's not just any human anymore. Silence, heavy with implication. Then the footsteps moved past my door and faded down the corridor. Not just any human anymore. What did that mean? I looked at the ring again, really looked at it. The stone seemed to pulse, or maybe that was just my hammering heart creating illusions. I tried to pull it off, but it wouldn't budge past my knuckle, as if it had been fitted perfectly, deliberately. Marriage. The word floated up from my fragmented memories, bringing with it flashes, music, dancing, torchlit corridors, faces I didn't recognize laughing and cheering, and eyes. Dark eyes watching me with an intensity that made my skin feel too tight. A voice, deep and rough as stone, grinding against stone. Do you accept? Had I answered? I couldn't remember. The memories were fragments, broken glass I couldn't piece together without cutting myself. I needed information. I needed to understand what had happened before I could figure out what to do next. The door beckoned, but something told me walking out unprepared would be worse than staying. I moved to a wardrobe against the far wall and opened it carefully. Clothes. Beautiful clothes in shades of silver and deep blue, nothing like the simple dresses I'd brought to the summit. Everything was sized for me, as if someone had measured me in my sleep. The thought made my skin crawl, but I forced myself to be practical. I couldn't wander around in a nightgown. I chose the simplest dress I could find. A dark blue wool that wouldn't draw attention, with long sleeves and a high neck. As I pulled it on, I noticed something on the dresser I'd missed before. My grandmother's compass, sitting beside a sealed envelope. Relief and suspicion warred in my chest as I grabbed the compass, clutching it tight enough to leave impressions on my palm. Then I picked up the envelope, heavy paper, sealed with wax pressed with a wolf's head. My hand shook as I broke the seal and unfolded the letter inside. The handwriting was strong, angular, each letter formed with precise control. Clara, you're awake. Good. We need to talk. What you remember of last night is likely incomplete. The wine at the celebration was stronger than intended for someone of your constitution, but the essential facts remain. You agreed to marry me. The ring on your finger is proof of that bond, witnessed by both my council and your delegation. I am Dominic Ashcroft, Alpha King of the Northern Pax. You are now my wife, Luna Queen of these territories. I understand this is overwhelming. I will explain everything when you're ready. Ring the bell beside the bed, and someone will bring you to me, or if you prefer, take your time. The castle is yours to explore, though I'd advise keeping to the eastern wing for now. You are safe here. Whatever you're afraid of, I promise you that. D. The letter slipped from my fingers and drifted to the floor. Luna Queen. The words made no sense. I was nobody. A girl who organized books, who'd never been chosen for anything, who'd spent her whole life being overlooked, and had made peace with that invisibility. This had to be a mistake. Some terrible, cosmic mistake. But the ring on my finger was real. The castle around me was real. And somewhere in this vast, strange place was the man, the Alpha King, who claimed I'd married him. My first instinct was to run. Find a way out. Disappear before anyone noticed. Return to my ordinary life and pretend this never happened. But even as I thought it, I knew it was impossible. You didn't accidentally marry an Alpha King and just walk away. Whatever had happened last night, it had bound me to something far bigger than myself. The only way out is through. I took a breath, then another. My reflection in the mirror caught my eye. Pale hair escaping its braid, gray eyes wide with fear, looking exactly like the frightened girl I'd always been. But there was something else there too. Something I hadn't seen before. A wildness, maybe, or just the shadow of possibility. If I was going to survive this, I needed to understand it first. I picked up the bell beside the bed and rang it once, the clear tone seeming to echo through dimensions I couldn't see. Within moments, there was a knock at the door. I called for them to enter, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. The woman who stepped inside was striking. Tall, with dark hair streaked silver, and eyes that held centuries of knowledge. She wore simple but elegant clothes, and moved with the fluid grace that marked her as lichen. But her expression was kind as she took me in. "Lady Clara," she said, her voice the same one I'd heard in the hallway. "I'm Margot, head of the household staff. His Majesty asked me to see to your needs. I want to see him, I said, before I could talk myself out of it. The king. I need answers. Margot studied me for a long moment, and I had the unsettling feeling she was seeing far more than my surface fear. Then she nodded. He's in his study. I'll take you to him. But first, she moved to the dresser and picked up a hairbrush. Let me help you. You'll want to look composed. I almost refused, pride prickling at being treated like a child. But something in Margot's eyes stopped me. This wasn't about making me pretty. This was about armor, about walking into whatever came next with dignity intact. I sat and let her gentle hands work through my tangled hair, rebraiding it in a crown around my head. As she worked, she spoke quietly. The king is not what you expect. None of us are, really, but he especially. She paused, choosing her words carefully. He doesn't do anything without reason. If he chose you, there was a reason. Trust that, even if you can't trust anything else yet. I don't remember choosing him, I whispered. Memory is funny that way, Margot said, securing the last pin. Sometimes the heart chooses before the mind catches up, and sometimes... She met my eyes in the mirror. We agreed to things we don't fully understand in the moment, only to discover later they were exactly what we needed. She stepped back, and I stood. In the mirror, I looked almost like someone else, someone who could be a queen, maybe. The thought was absurd, but I held on to it anyway. Ready? Margot asked. I touched my grandmother's compass, hanging once more around my neck where Margot had fastened it. Look, think, move forward. Ready, I lied. Margot led me through corridors that seemed designed to intimidate, high ceilings painted with battle scenes, tapestries depicting wolves bringing down prey, suits of armor standing sentinel at every turn. We passed other people, all of them likened by the way they moved, and every single one stopped to stare at me. Some looked curious, others skeptical, a few openly hostile. I kept my chin up and followed Margot, pretending I belonged here. Finally, we stopped before a heavy oak door. Margot knocked twice, and a voice from inside, that voice, deep and commanding, called for us to enter. The study was smaller than I'd expected, more intimate. Books lined every wall, and a fire crackled in the hearth, making the room warm despite the cold mountain air outside. At a desk by the window sat a man who made every instinct I possessed scream danger. He was massive, not just tall, but built like violence itself, all controlled power and coiled strength. Dark hair, longer than current fashion, fell across a face that would have been beautiful if it weren't so severe. Scars traced his jaw and disappeared beneath his collar, marking him as someone who'd survived things that should have killed him, but it was his eyes that held me frozen. Wolf gold, ancient, and fixed on me with an intensity that made me forget how to breathe. This was Dominic Ashcroft, Alpha King, my husband. He stood, moving with predatory grace, and I saw something flicker across his face. Not triumph or satisfaction, but something that looked almost like relief. Clara, he said, and the sound of my name in his mouth felt like a brand. Thank you for coming. We have much to discuss. And as Margot quietly withdrew and closed the door behind her, leaving me alone with the Wolf King who claimed I'd chosen him, I realized this was the moment everything would change. Again. He didn't move toward me, and somehow that was worse than if he had. Instead, Dominic remained by the window, silhouetted against the mountain light, giving me space I wasn't sure I wanted. The silence stretched between us like a living thing, and I realized he was waiting for me to speak first. I don't remember, I said finally, my voice smaller than I intended. Last night. I don't remember agreeing to marry you, I know. His voice was gentler than I expected from someone who looked like carved granite. The wine was miscalculated. Wolfsbane Reserve. It's traditional at bonding ceremonies, meant to lower inhibitions, but the sommelier didn't account for human metabolism. You weren't supposed to lose consciousness. But I did. I touched the ring, still immovable on my finger, and somehow I still ended up married. You agreed before the wine affected you fully. He moved then, just slightly, his hand lifting as if to reach for something before falling back to his side. Clara, I need you to understand. I didn't trick you. I didn't coerce you. What happened between us was complicated, but it was real. Then explain it to me. I forced myself to step farther into the room, closer to the fire, closer to him. Fear still hummed beneath my skin, but underneath it was something else. Anger, maybe, or just the desperate need to understand how my life had derailed so completely. Start from the beginning. Why would I agree to marry a stranger? Why would you want to marry me? I'm nobody. A human nobody. Something flickered in those gold eyes. Pain, quickly buried. You're not nobody. And we're not strangers, not really. We met 3 days ago, at the summit opening ceremony. I searched my memory, trying to piece together the fragments. The summit had been chaos. Hundreds of delegates, both human and lichen, gathered in the neutral territory of Whitmore Hall. I'd spent most of my time in the archives, translating old treaties, staying out of the way. But there had been a ceremony, torches and speeches, and the library, I whispered, the memory surfacing like something from a dream. You were in the library, late at night. You remember. He sounded almost relieved. I did, suddenly, with crystalline clarity. I'd been working late, cross-referencing a disputed boundary clause, when I'd heard footsteps. I'd looked up to find him there, this massive, dangerous man examining the ancient texts with surprising reverence. I should have been terrified. Instead, I'd felt. You asked me about the Treaty of Thornhold, I said slowly. About whether the translation was accurate, because the original Latin was ambiguous, and you explained it to me. Dominic's expression softened almost imperceptibly. Not like I was a king, or even like I was lichen, just like I was someone who wanted to understand. Do you know how rare that is? So you married me because I was polite to you in a library? The absurdity of it made something sharp twist in my chest. No. He moved closer now, each step deliberate, giving me time to retreat if I wanted. I didn't. I married you because we spent 3 hours talking that night, and for the first time in my life, I felt like someone saw me. Not the crown, not the power, not the monster everyone expects when they look at creatures like me. Just me. His words landed like stones in still water, creating ripples I couldn't control, because I remembered that conversation now. How easily we'd talked, moving from ancient treaties to philosophy, to the weight of expectations neither of us had asked for. How he'd listened when I'd mentioned my grandmother's teachings about finding your way through darkness. How I'd found myself smiling at his dry observations about political theater. How, when he'd finally left as dawn light crept through the windows, I'd felt more alone than I had in years. We talked for one night, I said, but my voice wavered. That's not enough to build a marriage on. No, he agreed, stopping a few feet away. But it was enough to build a foundation. The next day, there was an incident at the summit, a protest group, humans who don't believe in coexistence. They targeted the lichen delegates with silver poisoning. 3 of my people nearly died. I remembered the chaos, the lockdown, the way tension had crackled through the halls like electricity before a storm. You were there, Dominic continued, in the medical wing. You didn't have to be. You weren't a healer, weren't required. But you came anyway, and you held the hand of a young wolf named Thomas while the silver burned through his system. You sang to him. Do you remember? I did. Thomas, barely 20, his face gray with pain, his eyes terrified. I'd sung the old folk songs my grandmother used to sing to me when I was sick, and he'd gripped my hand so tight I'd had bruises for days afterward. He survived, I whispered. Because you stayed. Because you gave him something to hold on to when the pain was trying to pull him under. Dominic's voice had gone rough. Thomas is my cousin's son, family. And you saved him, not with medicine or power, but with simple human compassion. Anyone would have done the same, but they didn't. Only you. He was close enough now that I could see the scars on his throat more clearly, like claw marks that had healed wrong. Clara, do you understand what it's like to be seen as a predator your entire life? To have people flinch when you enter a room? To know that your very existence makes others afraid? I've been Alpha King for 12 years. I've led armies, negotiated treaties, executed traitors, and protected thousands. But I'm still alone. Always alone, because no one can see past the wolf to find the man. His hand lifted, hovering near my face but not touching, giving me the choice. Until you. You looked at me in that library and you saw someone who loved books. You looked at Thomas and you saw someone worth saving, and I thought, maybe, just maybe, here's someone who could stand beside me. Not behind me, not beneath me, but beside me. An equal. I'm not equal to an alpha king, I said, but something in my chest was cracking open, flooding me with feelings I didn't want to name. You're right. You're better. His smile was small, sad, infinitely gentle. You're human, Clara, mortal, fragile, and yet you walked into a room full of poisoned wolves and offered comfort. That takes a courage I've never possessed. I wanted to argue, to tell him he was wrong, that I wasn't brave. I was just a girl who couldn't stand to watch someone suffer. But the way he was looking at me, like I was something precious and rare, made the words stick in my throat. So when the summit reached its final night, he continued, and the traditions called for bonding ceremonies between willing participants from both sides, symbolic unions to represent our new alliance, I asked if you would consider me. Not as a king asking a subject, but as a man asking a woman he'd come to admire deeply in 3 short days. And I said yes. The memory was crystallizing now, sharp and clear. The garden at twilight, fairy lights strung through ancient trees. His hand extended toward me with something vulnerable in his expression. The way my heart had lurched, half terror and half something that felt dangerously like hope. You said yes, he confirmed quietly. You said you'd been invisible your whole life. And maybe that was because you were waiting to be seen by the right eyes. Then you laughed and said that was probably the wine talking. But Clara, it wasn't. Not then. The wine came later during the ceremony itself, and by then it was already done. I sank into the chair by the fire, my legs suddenly unable to hold me. This was real. This had happened. I had agreed to marry an alpha king because for 3 days he'd made me feel like I mattered. What happens now? I asked, staring at the flames. Do I have a choice? Can I leave? The silence that followed was so complete. I could hear the fire crackling, my own heartbeat, the distant sound of wind against the castle walls. Yes, Dominic said finally, and when I looked up, his face was carefully blank. The bond is legal, witnessed, sealed, but I won't hold you prisoner. If you want to leave, I'll arrange safe passage back to your home. The marriage will be annulled quietly. No one will force you to stay. But? There was always a but I'm asking you not to. He knelt then, bringing himself to my eye level, and the sheer humility of the gesture from someone so powerful made my throat tight. Give me 1 month. Stay here. Let me show you what your life could be. Let us figure out if what we felt during those 3 days could grow into something real. If after 30 days you still want to leave, I'll let you go with my blessing, and enough resources to build whatever life you choose. And if I stay, then you become Luna Queen in truth. You share my throne, my responsibilities, my life. You face dangers you can't imagine, navigate politics that would make human courts look like children's games, and live with the knowledge that half my kingdom will never fully accept a human queen. His hand moved to cover mine where it rested on the chair arm, careful, asking permission. But you'll also never be invisible again. You'll have power, purpose, and, if we're very lucky, partnership with someone who sees you exactly as you are and wants you anyway. His touch was warm, solid, real. The ring on my finger caught the firelight, seeming to glow from within. I'm scared, I admitted, the words barely a whisper. Good. So am I. His smile was crooked, almost boyish despite the scars. Anyone who isn't scared of something this big is a fool. But Clara, I think we could be extraordinary together. Will you give us a chance to find out? I thought of my grandmother, who'd crossed an ocean alone to build a new life, who'd taught me that courage wasn't the absence of fear, but moving forward despite it, who'd given me that compass so I'd always remember. The only way out is through. And I thought of Thomas, gripping my hand while silver burned his veins, and how I'd stayed because leaving him alone felt unthinkable. How Dominic had seen that choice and understood something in me I hadn't seen in myself. Maybe I'd been invisible because I was afraid to be seen. Maybe invisibility had been armor, protecting me from rejection by ensuring I never tried to be chosen in the first place. But I had been chosen by this fierce, scarred king who read ancient treaties and knelt before a frightened girl like she was worth the humility. 1 month, I heard myself say, but I need things to be clear between us. No more surprises, no more decisions made while I'm unconscious. If this is going to work, even for 30 days, we have to be honest with each other. Relief flooded his features so completely it transformed him. Agreed. Complete honesty. I'll answer any question you have, show you every corner of this life you're considering. Nothing hidden. And separate rooms, I added quickly, heat flooding my cheeks. We barely know each other. I can't. Of course. He stood, offering me his hand to help me up. This suite has adjoining chambers. You'll have your own space, your own sanctuary. I won't enter without permission. I took his hand and let him pull me to my feet. Standing this close, I could smell pine and wood smoke on his skin, could see flecks of darker gold in his eyes, could feel the careful control he maintained over his strength. Your people are going to hate this, I said. A human queen. They already stare at me like I'm an intruder. Some will. Others will surprise you. He hadn't released my hand yet, and I found I didn't want him to. My beta Jackson is already charmed by you. Margot clearly approves. She wouldn't have been so gentle if she didn't. And Thomas has been asking about you constantly since we arrived. He wants to thank you properly. I'd like to see him, I said, and meant it. Then you will. I'll arrange it for this afternoon. Dominic's thumb brushed across my knuckles, a gesture so gentle it made my breath catch. Thank you, Clara, for giving this a chance, for giving me a chance. Before I could respond, a sharp knock sounded at the door. Dominic's expression shifted instantly, the vulnerable man disappearing behind the mask of the king. Enter, he called, and the door opened to reveal a tall, dark-skinned man with close-cropped hair and eyes that missed nothing. My lord, he said, his gaze flickering to me with curiosity before returning to Dominic. The council has assembled. They're demanding an audience about the situation. Of course they are, Dominic sighed, but didn't release my hand. Jackson, meet Clara. My wife, Clara. This is Jackson Sterling, my beta and oldest friend. Jackson's eyebrows rose fractionally, but his bow was respectful. My lady, welcome to Wolfhaven. Wolfhaven? I echoed. The castle, Dominic explained. Your new home, at least for the next month. Jackson, tell the council I'll meet them in an hour. I want time to show Clara around first. They won't like waiting. They rarely like anything I do. Dominic's smile was sharp now, all teeth. They'll survive. Jackson bowed again and withdrew, but not before I caught the gleam of amusement in his eyes. The council, I said, once we were alone again. Let me guess. They're not thrilled about the human queen either. Half of them have already drafted speeches about why this marriage should be dissolved. Dominic said it lightly, but I could hear the tension underneath. They'll argue tradition, bloodlines, the sanctity of pure Lycan heritage, all the usual justifications for keeping power concentrated in the right hands. Should I be there? When you face them? He looked at me sharply. You'd want to be? If I'm going to be your wife, even temporarily, I should understand what I'm walking into. And if they're going to argue against me, I'd rather hear it directly than hiding in my room. Something fierce and proud blazed in his expression. Then you'll come. But Clara, they'll try to intimidate you. They'll use every psychological weapon they have to make you feel small, unworthy, breakable. I thought of every time I'd been overlooked, dismissed, treated as invisible because I wasn't bold or beautiful or important enough to matter. I'd spent my whole life being small. Maybe it was time to try being something else. Let them try, I said, and was surprised by how steady my voice sounded. I'm not as breakable as I look. Dominic's smile was brilliant, transforming his severe features into something almost beautiful. No, he said softly, lifting my hand to press a kiss against my knuckles. formal, chaste, but making my pulse race nonetheless. No, you're not. They're going to learn that very quickly. And as he led me from the study to show me the castle that was somehow now my home, I felt the first stirrings of something unfamiliar in my chest. Not quite confidence. Not yet. But maybe the beginning of it. The sense that perhaps, just perhaps, I could grow into this role I'd stumbled into. One day at a time, one choice at a time. Look, think, move forward. The council chamber was designed to intimidate. Vaulted ceilings disappeared into shadow despite the afternoon light streaming through stained glass windows that depicted battles, wolves tearing through enemies, kingdoms falling, blood rendered in crimson glass that cast everything in shades of violence. A massive table dominated the center, carved from a single ancient oak, surrounded by high-backed chairs that looked more like thrones, and seated in those chairs were 12 of the most powerful-looking individuals I'd ever seen. They all turned to watch as Dominic and I entered, and the weight of their stares made me want to shrink back into invisibility. But I'd promised myself I wouldn't, so I kept my chin up, my hand steady in Dominic's, and met their gazes one by one. Most were older, weathered by time and power, their eyes holding centuries of knowledge and judgment. But a few were younger, including a woman with silver blonde hair and features so perfect they looked carved, who stared at me with such open hostility it was almost refreshing in its honesty. "Counselors," Dominic said, his voice filling the space with effortless authority. "Thank you for your patience. I'd like to formally introduce Clara Ashford, my wife and your Luna Queen." The silence that followed was deafening. Finally, an elderly man with a beard like steel wool spoke. "With respect, my lord, we cannot accept this arrangement. A human queen? It's unprecedented, dangerous, against every tradition we hold sacred." "Counselor Brennan," Dominic acknowledged, guiding me to a chair beside his at the head of the table. "I expected your objection, and you're wrong. We have precedent. The Treaty of Thornhold 1247 specifically allows for cross-species bonding in cases of— That treaty was written for political hostages, not queens," the silver-haired woman interrupted, her voice like cut glass. "And forgive my bluntness, but your bride hardly seems equipped to navigate our world. She looks ready to faint." Every eye turned to me. My heart hammered, but I thought of Thomas gripping my hand, of Dominic kneeling in his study, of my grandmother crossing an ocean alone. "I'm not going to faint," I said, surprised by how clear my voice sounded. "Though I appreciate your concern, Lady Evangeline Frost," she said coldly, "First Counselor and Alpha of the Eastern Territories. And I'm not concerned. I'm appalled. This is a mockery of everything our kind represents. Because I'm human," I asked, meeting her ice-blue gaze directly. "Because you're weak." She leaned forward, and I caught the flash of gold in her eyes that marked her wolf rising to the surface. "You have no power, no bloodline, no understanding of our ways. What could you possibly offer a kingdom of predators except vulnerability?" The question hung in the air, and I felt Dominic tense beside me, preparing to defend me. But something in Evangeline's words struck a chord. Not offense, but recognition, because she was right. By their standards, I was weak, powerless, vulnerable. But vulnerability wasn't the same as worthlessness. "You're right," I said, and felt the room shift in surprise. "I am human. I have no supernatural strength, no enhanced senses, no ability to transform into something more powerful. I'm mortal, fragile, and completely out of my depth in your world." I paused, choosing my next words carefully, but I've spent my entire life being underestimated because I'm not physically strong, and I've learned that there are different kinds of power. The power to listen, to understand, to show compassion even when fear tells you to look away. "Pretty words," Evangeline sneered, "but compassion won't protect you when our enemies come. And they will come. Make no mistake. The moment our rivals learn the Alpha King has bound himself to a human, they'll see it as weakness to exploit. Then let them try." Dominic's voice had gone quiet, which somehow made it more dangerous. "And let them learn the same lesson I did, that underestimating Clara would be their first and last mistake. You're blinded by sentiment, Brennan said, though his tone was gentler than Evangeline's. My lord, we understand the appeal. She's young, pretty, and apparently you've formed an attachment. But this is bigger than personal feelings. You're Alpha King. Your mate should strengthen our kingdom, not endanger it. Clara does strengthen it, Dominic countered. In ways you haven't begun to understand. But since you require proof, he turned to me, something challenging in his expression. Tell them about Thomas. I blinked, caught off guard. What about him? Tell them what you did, what you saw when you looked at a dying wolf. Understanding dawned. This was a test, not from the council, but from Dominic. A chance to show them who I was in my own words. I could refuse, let him defend me, maintain my protective invisibility, or I could step forward. Look, think, move forward. 3 days ago, I began, addressing the council though my hands trembled in my lap. There was an attack at the summit, silver poisoning. I was in the archives when I heard the alarms, and instead of sheltering in place like we were told, I went to the medical wing. I saw a few counselors exchange glances, probably noting my poor judgment. When I got there, the healers were overwhelmed. So many injured, not enough hands, and in the corner, I saw a young man, Thomas, being ignored because the healers had prioritized more critical cases. I remembered it vividly now, Thomas's gray skin, his labored breathing, the way he'd been trying so hard to stay silent, despite the agony written across his face. He was dying quietly, I continued, not making a fuss, not demanding attention, just enduring. Because that's what wolves do, right? You're taught to be strong, to bear pain without complaint. But I looked at him, and I didn't see a wolf. I saw someone who was terrified and alone and trying not to show it. So I sat with him. I held his hand, and when he asked me if it was going to be okay, I lied and said yes, because sometimes a comforting lie is kinder than a devastating truth. The room was completely silent now. Even Evangeline had stopped sneering. He survived because the healers eventually got to him, I said. Not because of anything I did. But he told me later that the only thing that kept him conscious, kept him fighting, was my hand in his, because someone had chosen to see him as worth staying for. I met Evangeline's eyes. You're right that I'm weak by your standards. But Thomas didn't need someone strong in that moment. He needed someone who would stay. And that's what I can offer this kingdom. The willingness to stay, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. The silence stretched so long I thought I'd failed. Then Jackson, who'd been standing silently by the door, spoke. Thomas is my nephew, he said quietly, and he hasn't stopped talking about the pale-haired human who sang to him in the darkness. He calls her his angel. He looked directly at Evangeline. You want to tell him his angel isn't worthy of being Luna? Evangeline's expression flickered. Something almost like shame crossing her features before hardening back into ice. One act of kindness doesn't make a queen. No, agreed a new voice. And I turned to see an older woman I hadn't noticed before. So still she'd blended into the shadows. But it reveals character, and character is what sustains a leader when power fails. She studied me with eyes that seemed to see straight through to my bones. I am Miriam, keeper of our histories, and I have watched many rise and fall from positions of power. The strongest often fell fastest, because they forgot that ruling isn't about domination. It's about connection, about understanding the needs of those you protect. Miriam, Brennan protested, you can't possibly support this. I support giving the girl a chance, Miriam interrupted. She speaks with more wisdom than half this council, and she's been here less than a day. Perhaps that should tell us something about ourselves. I felt a surge of gratitude toward this stranger who'd defended me, but Dominic's hand found mine under the table, squeezing gently. A warning. This wasn't over. Fine, Evangeline said, her voice sharp as broken glass. Let's say we give her a chance, but understand this, Clara. She made my name sound like an insult. If you endanger this kingdom, if your weakness becomes a liability, I will personally ensure you're removed, one way or another. The threat hung in the air, clear and unmistakable. Dominic started to rise, anger blazing in his eyes, but I squeezed his hand back. Stop. Let me handle this. I understand. I said to Evangeline, holding her hostile gaze. You don't trust me. You don't want me here. And honestly, I don't blame you. If I were in your position, I'd probably feel the same way. But I'm asking you to judge me by my actions, not your assumptions. Give me time to prove whether I'm worthy of this role or not. And if you prove unworthy, then I'll leave, I said simply. I'm not here to cling to power I can't handle. I'm here because your king asked me to try. So let me try. And if I fail, I'll accept the consequences. Something shifted in Evangeline's expression. Not approval, exactly, but perhaps a grudging respect for my directness. She leaned back in her chair, arms crossed. 1 month. We'll reconvene then and make a formal decision about whether this arrangement continues. That seems fair, Dominic said, though his tone suggested he found it anything but. Are there any other concerns the council wishes to raise? Just one, Brennan said, and his expression had gone grave. The southern border. We've had reports of increased activity from the Shadowfen pack. They've been testing our defenses, pushing boundaries. If they learn about the new Luna, they'll see it as an invitation to attack. Dominic finished grimly. I know. I've already dispatched additional patrols and ordered the border settlements to heightened alert. It won't be enough, Evangeline said. The Shadowfen Alpha Victor has been looking for an excuse to challenge your authority for years. A human queen will be all the justification he needs to claim you've gone soft, that the northern packs need stronger leadership. My stomach dropped. I'm making you vulnerable. No. Dominic's voice was firm. Victor was always going to challenge me eventually. This just accelerates the timeline. But Clara... He turned to face me fully. This is what I meant about dangers you can't imagine. There are wolves out there who will see you as a weakness to exploit, who will try to hurt you to get to me. Then we need to make sure they can't, Jackson said pragmatically. Increased security on the Luna, personal guards, restricted access to certain areas of the castle. I won't be a prisoner, I said quickly. You'll be protected, Dominic countered. There's a difference. Is there? I challenged. Because it sounds like you're planning to lock me in a tower for my own safety. Would you rather be dead? Evangeline asked bluntly. The question should have terrified me. Instead, it clarified something. I'd spent my whole life being safe, being invisible, never taking risks, because risks meant possible rejection or failure or pain. And where had it gotten me? To a small life, a quiet life, a life where I'd never been chosen for anything. Now I'd been chosen. Now I had a chance to be something more than invisible, but only if I was willing to accept the danger that came with visibility. I'd rather be useful, I said. If there's a threat, teach me how to recognize it. If I need to defend myself, show me how. Don't just hide me away and hope the danger passes. Dominic stared at me like I'd grown a second head. You want combat training? I want to not be helpless, I corrected. I want to understand the world I'm living in now, including its dangers. You said complete honesty, remember? So tell me truly, what am I facing? The council members exchanged glances, and I caught what might have been approval in Miriam's eyes. Dominic studied me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. All right. Tomorrow we start training. Jackson will work with you on basic self-defense and situational awareness. Margot will teach you castle protocols and who to trust. Miriam, he glanced at the historian, can brief you on pack politics and our current alliances. And what will you teach me? I asked. His smile was slow, dangerous, and made my pulse skip. How to be a queen. The council meeting dissolved after that, members filing out with varying expressions, skepticism, curiosity, hostility. Evangeline left without a word, but Miriam paused beside me. You did well, she said quietly. Better than most would have in your position. But Clara, a word of advice. The biggest danger you face won't come from external enemies. It will come from internal doubt, from that voice that tells you you're not enough. Don't listen to it. Not anymore. She left before I could respond, leaving me standing beside Dominic in the now empty chamber. I started, then didn't know how to finish. Terrifying? Dominic supplied. Overwhelming? Honest, I said. They hate me, but at least they're not pretending otherwise. I can work with honest. He laughed, the sound surprising and warm. You're remarkable. You know that? I'm scared out of my mind, I admitted. Yes, but you're doing it anyway. He touched my face, gentle as a whisper. That's what courage is, Clara. Not the absence of fear, but the choice to move forward despite it. My grandmother's words, in his mouth. The coincidence made my throat tight. I should rest, I said, suddenly exhausted. Tomorrow sounds intense. It will be. But you'll have help. Jackson's the best fighter I know. If anyone can teach you to defend yourself, it's him. As we walked back through the castle corridors, I felt the weight of everything pressing down. The ring on my finger, the title I didn't understand, the enemies gathering at the borders. 1 month. I'd promised to try for 1 month. I just hoped I'd survive it. When we reached the suite of rooms that was apparently mine, Dominic paused at the doorway. Clara, what you said in there about leaving if you prove unworthy, don't do that again. Don't make promises I intend to keep. Don't give the council ammunition to use against you. Against us. His expression was serious. I meant what I said. You're not going anywhere unless you choose to. But they don't need to know you're willing to walk away. Let them think you're here to stay, that you're committed fully. It makes you seem stronger. So you want me to lie? I want you to be strategic. He softened. But maybe that's a lesson for another day. You've had enough for now. Rest. I'll have food sent up. He started to leave, then turned back. Thank you. For standing up to the council. For standing beside me. It meant more than you know. Before I could respond, he was gone, leaving me alone in rooms that still felt foreign. I sank onto the bed, exhaustion crashing over me in waves. 1 day down, 29 to go. Somewhere in the castle, I heard a wolf howl. Lonely, haunting, calling into the growing darkness. And I wondered if it was Dominic, if wolves could feel the same bone-deep loneliness that humans did. If maybe we weren't so different after all. The next morning arrived too soon, dragging me from dreams of wolves with golden eyes and councils that judged me with every breath. Margot arrived with breakfast and clothes more practical than beautiful. Sturdy leather pants, a fitted tunic, boots that looked designed for movement rather than elegance, training attire, she explained, setting down a tray of food that smelled divine. Jackson's already in the courtyard. He's eager. Eager to teach me or eager to prove I can't learn? I asked, pulling on the clothes. They fit perfectly, and I wondered again how they'd managed to size everything so precisely. Margot's smile was enigmatic. With Jackson, those might be the same thing. He's a good man, Clara, but he's protective of Dominic. He'll test you to make sure you're not going to break. Everyone keeps assuming I'll break. Because you look breakable. Margot helped me braid my hair back in a crown again, but tighter this time, secured with enough pins to survive a hurricane. That's not an insult. It's an observation. Humans are fragile compared to us. It's simply fact. But fragile doesn't mean useless, I said, echoing my own words from yesterday. No, Margot agreed, her hands gentle on my shoulders. It doesn't. My grandmother was human. She married into a pack 60 years ago, and everyone said it would be a disaster. She outlived 3 wars, raised 5 children, and when she died at 97, the entire territory mourned for a month. Fragile, yes, but unbreakable where it mattered. The story settled something in my chest. I wasn't the first. Wouldn't be the last. There was precedent for human women surviving in this world of wolves. I just had to be smart enough to learn how. The courtyard was massive, surrounded by high walls and populated with guards running drills. They all stopped to watch as I emerged, and I felt the familiar weight of scrutiny. But this time, instead of shrinking from it, I straightened my spine. Let them look. Let them judge. I was here to learn. Jackson waited in the center of the space, dressed in simple training clothes that showed the lethal efficiency of his build. He was tall, muscular in the way of someone who fought for survival rather than vanity, and his dark eyes tracked my approach with unsettling intensity. "Lady Clara," he said, his tone neutral. Ready to begin? As ready as I'll ever be, I admitted. His expression flickered with something, approval maybe, before settling back into professional distance. Good. Honesty is important in training. If you're hurt, if you need to stop, if something doesn't make sense, you tell me immediately. Understood? Understood. First lesson. Awareness. He gestured to the courtyard around us. Tell me what you see. I looked around, confused by the question. Guards training. Stone walls. Weapons on racks. You. Wrong. He moved with sudden speed, appearing behind me before I could blink. You see surface details. I need you to see threats, exits, advantages. Look again. My heart hammered from his unexpected movement, but I forced myself to focus. This time, I looked deeper. Guards training, but some are watching us, which means divided attention. Stone walls with murder holes at the top. Good for defense, but also for archers targeting the courtyard. Weapons on racks, accessible but also exposed, could be stolen or used against us. 3 exits visible, but that arch, I pointed, looks narrower, probably easier to defend. And your position between me and the main gate, either to protect me or block my escape. I'm not sure which. Jackson's smile was fierce. Better. Much better. Now tell me, where's the biggest threat in this courtyard right now? I scanned the guards, looking for hostile expressions or aggressive postures. Found nothing obvious. Then I remembered Margot's words about testing me, and Evangeline's barely concealed hostility yesterday. The threat isn't in the courtyard, I said slowly. It's in the castle. The council. People who want me to fail. Correct. Jackson circled me slowly. Physical threats are easy to spot once you know what to look for, but you're going to be a queen, Clara. Your biggest dangers will come disguised as allies. Poison in your wine. Rumors that destroy your reputation. Political maneuvers that isolate you from power. You need to develop instincts that go beyond the physical. How do I do that? By learning to read people. To trust your gut when something feels wrong, even if you can't articulate why. He stopped in front of me. Do I feel dangerous to you right now? I studied him. His posture was relaxed, hands loose at his sides, expression open. Everything signaled safety, but there was something in his eyes, a coiled readiness, that whispered predator. Yes, I said, you feel dangerous. Not threatening, but dangerous. Like you could break me in half without effort. But you're choosing not to. That's control, Jackson said. Every lichen you meet has that same capacity for violence. We're predators down to our bones. But civilization is about choosing not to act on every instinct. About channeling strength into protection rather than domination. He stepped back. The king has that control in abundance. Most of the court does too. But some, like Evangeline, see control as weakness. They respect raw power more than disciplined power. So how do I survive someone like her? You don't try to match her strength. You'll lose every time. Jackson moved to the weapon racks and selected 2 wooden practice daggers, tossing one to me. I caught it clumsily. Instead, you be what she isn't. Smart, patient, empathetic. You make alliances with people she's too proud to notice. You learn things she's too arrogant to study. And when she finally moves against you, and she will, you're ready with a defense she never saw coming. That sounds like war. Politics is war. His smile was grim. Just with prettier weapons. Now, defensive stance. I'm going to teach you how to stay alive long enough to use that clever mind of yours. The next 2 hours were brutal. Jackson moved me through basic self-defense. How to break grips. Where to strike to disable an attacker. How to use my smaller size as an advantage rather than a weakness. He was patient but demanding, correcting my form again and again until my muscles screamed. You're thinking too much, he said after I fumbled a defensive block for the 5th time. Your body knows what to do. Trust it. My body knows how to organize books, I gasped, sweat running down my temples. Not fight wolves. Your body knows how to survive. That's coded into every human just like violence is coded into every wolf. You just need to remember. He moved into an attack position. Again. And this time, don't think, react. He came at me fast, and instinct took over. I dropped low like he'd taught me, used his momentum against him. and somehow ended up with my practice dagger against his ribs, while his swing missed entirely. We both froze. That, Jackson said, satisfaction in his voice, was perfect. See? Your body knows. Pride flickered through the exhaustion. I'd done it. One move, but I'd actually defended myself against someone who could kill me without effort. Don't let it go to your head, Jackson warned, reading my expression. In a real fight, I'd have had 3 other ways to counter that move. But for day 1, you're doing well. A commotion at the courtyard entrance made us both turn. Dominic strode in, flanked by 2 guards, his expression thunderous. The training guards immediately stood straighter, and I felt Jackson tense beside me. My lord, Jackson called. What's wrong? Message from the southern border. Dominic's voice was tight with controlled fury. Victor has formally challenged my authority. He's claiming the throne should pass to him, that my choice of a human mate proves I'm unfit to lead. The words hit me like physical blows. This was my fault. My presence had triggered exactly what Evangeline had predicted. When? Jackson asked. All business. 3 days. He's invoked the trial of dominance. Dominic's eyes found mine across the courtyard, and I saw guilt flash through them before he locked it down. It's to the yield, or... He didn't finish, but he didn't need to. I'd read enough about Lycan culture during my preparation for the summit. Trial of dominance. 2 alphas fighting for leadership, usually to the yield, until one submitted. But sometimes, when challenges were bitter enough, to something more final. You'll destroy him, Jackson said confidently. Victor is strong, ruthless, and he'll have prepared for this. Dominic moved closer, his attention entirely on me now. Clara, I need you to understand. This would have happened eventually. Victor has been looking for an excuse for years. You didn't cause this. But I accelerated it, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. That's what Evangeline said, and she was right. Evangeline says a lot of things. Dominic stopped in front of me, and I saw the warrior in him now. The king who'd survived battles and politics and betrayals. But this changes nothing between us. I'm not sending you away. I'm not regretting my choice. You're mine now, Clara, and I protect what's mine. The possessiveness should have bothered me. Instead, it sent heat through my veins. What do you need from me? I asked. Surprise flickered across his features. What? You have 3 days to prepare for a fight that could cost you everything. What do you need from me? How can I help? Dominic glanced at Jackson, something passing between them I couldn't read. Then he looked back at me. I need you to stay safe, to continue your training, to show the court that you're not intimidated by Victor's challenge. That's it? I felt frustration rising. I'm supposed to just exist prettily while you risk your life? You're supposed to trust me to handle threats the way I've been handling them for 12 years, Dominic countered. Clara, I know you want to help, but this is beyond me? I interrupted. Because I'm human and fragile and useless in a real fight. Because I can't fight him properly if I'm worried about you, he said. And the raw honesty in his voice stopped my anger cold. If I'm distracted thinking about whether you're safe, whether Victor has sent someone after you while I'm occupied, whether you're... He stopped, jaw clenched. I need to know you're protected. That's how you help me. I wanted to argue, but looking at his face, seeing the genuine fear beneath the king's mask, I understood. This wasn't about thinking I was useless. It was about him being terrified of losing me. Okay, I said quietly. I'll stay safe. I'll train with Jackson. I'll be careful. Relief flooded his expression. Thank you. But Dominic... I stepped closer, lowering my voice so only he could hear. After you win, because you will win, we're going to talk about me being more than just something you protect. I'm your partner, remember? Or I'm trying to be. That means I support you, not just stand behind you. His smile was slow and warm. After I win, he agreed. We'll talk about everything. He touched my face, thumb brushing my cheek. I have to go. The council needs to strategize, but Clara, thank you for understanding. He left before I could respond, taking his guards with him. Jackson watched him go, then turned to me with an expression I couldn't quite read. That was well done, he said finally. What was? Not pushing. knowing when to step back. He picked up the practice daggers, but he's right, about needing you safe. Victor won't play fair. If he can't beat Dominic in honest combat, he'll find another way to win. And the easiest way to break an alpha is through his mate. Cold fear washed through me. You think he'll come after me? I think he'll try. Which is why your training just became a lot more intensive. Jackson's expression was grim. We have 3 days to make sure you can defend yourself long enough for help to arrive if you're attacked. It's not much time, but it'll have to be enough. What if it's not? Then you do what you did with Thomas, Jackson said simply. You survive. You hold on. You refuse to give up, even when everything in you is screaming to surrender. He met my eyes. You're stronger than you think, Clara. You proved that yesterday with the council. Now you just need to believe it yourself. The rest of the day blurred into a haze of training, instruction, and information. Jackson worked me until my muscles trembled with exhaustion. Margot drilled me on court protocols and who to trust, a surprisingly short list. Miriam spent an hour teaching me about pack dynamics and the historical tensions between the northern and southern territories. By evening, I was so exhausted I could barely stand. But I'd learned more in one day than I had in weeks at the summit. I was beginning to understand the world I'd stumbled into, its dangers, its politics, its brutal honesty. And I was beginning to understand something else too. These people, Jackson with his gruff protectiveness, Margot with her gentle guidance, even Miriam with her clear-eyed assessment of my strengths and weaknesses, they were starting to see me not as an intruder, but as something else, as someone worth teaching, worth protecting, worth believing in. It wasn't acceptance, not yet, but it was a beginning. That night, I stood at my window watching the sun set over the mountains, turning them gold and crimson. Somewhere in this castle, Dominic was preparing for a fight that could cost him everything. Somewhere beyond these walls, Victor was doing the same, planning not just to defeat a rival, but to tear apart everything Dominic had built. And I was here, wearing a ring I barely understood, carrying a title I hadn't earned, trying to figure out how a librarian's assistant from a small coastal town could possibly survive in a world of wolves and politics and ancient grudges. My grandmother's compass hung heavy around my neck. I pulled it out, watching the needle swing and settle, always pointing true north no matter how lost I felt. The only way out is through. 3 days. I had 3 days to become someone stronger than I'd ever been. 3 days to prove I belonged here, that I could survive this world I'd chosen. 3 days to figure out who Clara Ashford really was, beneath all the fear and doubt and invisibility I'd worn like armor my entire life. The wolf howl came again, lonely and fierce, calling across the mountains, and this time, I understood what it meant. It meant home, family, belonging. It meant fight. I touched the ring on my finger, feeling its weight, its permanence. Then I turned away from the window and began to plan. If Victor wanted to use me to break Dominic, he'd find I wasn't nearly as breakable as I looked. It was time to stop being invisible. It was time to become a queen. The morning of the trial dawned cold and sharp, the kind of morning where every breath felt like swallowing knives. I'd barely slept, my mind circling through everything that could go wrong, every scenario where Dominic didn't come back. But when Margot arrived to help me dress, I pushed the fear down deep. Today wasn't about my terror. It was about standing beside the man who'd chosen me, showing his people that their Luna wouldn't crumble under pressure. The dress Margot brought was unlike anything I'd worn before, deep midnight blue with silver embroidery that caught the light like starlight, fitted to move with me rather than restrict. Battle formal, she called it. Elegant enough for a queen, practical enough to run if needed. You look fierce, Margot said, securing the final pins in my hair. Like someone who belongs. I don't feel fierce, I admitted. I feel terrified. Good. Fear keeps you sharp. She placed a circlet on my head, simple silver worked into a design of wolves and crescents. But don't let anyone see it. Today, you're not Clara the librarian. You're Luna Queen. Act like it. The arena was ancient, carved from natural stone in a valley between two mountains. Thousands had gathered, not just from Dominic's territory, but from packs across the region, all come to witness whether the Alpha King would hold his throne or fall. The crowd parted as I entered with Jackson and my personal guards, and I felt their eyes like physical weight. Some were curious, some hostile, but others. I saw Thomas in the crowd, his face breaking into a smile when he saw me. Saw Miriam near the front, her expression approving. Saw ordinary wolves, farmers, and craftspeople and families, watching me with something that looked almost like hope. They wanted to believe I could be their queen. I just had to believe it too. The council sat in positions of honor. Evangeline's expression unreadable as I took my seat beside the empty throne meant for Dominic. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone. The human woman sitting where a powerful mate should be, looking fragile and out of place. Let them think what they wanted. I was here. Victor arrived with his own entourage, and the crowd's energy shifted to something electric and dangerous. He was massive, even for a lichen, taller than Dominic, broader, with scars that spoke of countless battles won. His eyes swept the arena and landed on me, and his smile was all predator. "So that's the human," he called out, his voice carrying easily across the space. "The weakness that's made our king forget what it means to lead wolves." Anger flared in my chest, but I kept my face neutral. This was theater. He wanted me to react, to prove his point about human fragility. "She doesn't look like much," Victor continued, playing to the crowd. "Tell me, little human, when your king falls today, will you submit to me as sweetly? Or will I have to teach you what it means to serve a real alpha?" The threat was clear, and I felt Jackson tense beside me. Several guards moved closer, protective. But before anyone could respond, Dominic stepped into the arena. He'd stripped down to fighting clothes. Simple leather pants, bare-chested, every scar on display like a history of survival. But it was his eyes that silenced the crowd. Wolf gold and burning with controlled fury, they fixed on Victor with lethal promise. "You want to discuss weakness, Victor?" Dominic's voice was quiet, but it carried. "Let's discuss how you hide behind challenges and threats because you lack the actual strength to lead. How you've terrorized smaller packs into submission, mistaking fear for respect. How you think taking what belongs to another makes you powerful, when really it just makes you a coward." Victor snarled, the sound inhuman. "I'll enjoy tearing out your throat for that." "You can try." Dominic's smile was sharp as broken glass. "But first, let me make something very clear to everyone watching. Clara isn't my weakness. She's my strength. And if you think her humanity makes her fragile, you're going to learn a very painful lesson about underestimating what you don't understand." His eyes found mine across the arena, and something passed between us. Trust, partnership. The promise that whatever happened next, we'd face it together. Then the trial began. I'd read about lichen combat, but reading couldn't prepare me for the reality. They moved with impossible speed, strength that shook the ground, violence that was beautiful and terrible in equal measure. Dominic was skilled, precise, fighting with the controlled power Jackson had described, but Victor was brutal, relentless, using his size advantage to press attack after attack. Blood stained the arena floor. Both fighters bore wounds, Victor's shoulder torn, Dominic's ribs showing dark bruises that meant internal damage. The crowd roared with every blow, and I gripped the arms of my chair so hard my hands ached. This was my fault. If Victor killed Dominic, it would be because I'd given him the excuse to challenge, because a human woman hadn't been strong enough, careful enough, worthy enough. No. I forced the thought away. That was the old Clara thinking. The invisible girl who blamed herself for every rejection. The new Clara, the Luna Queen I was trying to become, understood something different. This wasn't about me. This was about Victor's ambition, his hunger for power he hadn't earned. He would have challenged Dominic eventually, with or without me as an excuse. I was just convenient justification for something he'd always planned. The fight was turning. Victor's greater strength was wearing Dominic down. Each blow harder to block, each wound slower to heal. I saw it in Dominic's movements. The slight hesitation, the way he favored his left side. He was losing. The crowd sensed it too, their energy shifting from excitement to something darker. If Dominic fell, Victor would become Alpha King, would take everything Dominic had built. His territory, his people, his throne. his wife. The thought crystallized everything. I couldn't fight Victor myself. I'd be dead before I took 2 steps. But I could do something else. I stood, the movement drawing attention even in the midst of combat. Evangeline shot me a warning look, but I ignored her. Jackson grabbed my arm. "What are you doing?" he hissed. "Something stupid," I said. "Or something brilliant. I'm not sure which." I walked to the edge of the arena, close enough that Victor could hear me, far enough that the guards could pull me back if needed. The fighters had paused, both breathing hard, circling each other. Victor's attention snapped to me, and his grin was vicious. "Come to watch your king fall, little human?" "No," I said clearly, projecting my voice the way Margot had taught me. "I came to remind everyone what this fight is really about. You claim Dominic is weak because he chose a human mate, but the truth is, you're terrified of what that choice represents." Victor's expression darkened. "I fear nothing. You fear change," I continued, addressing not just Victor, but the entire crowd. "You fear a future where strength isn't just measured in claws and teeth, where compassion and intelligence matter as much as dominance, where a human woman can stand beside a wolf king as an equal, and that partnership makes both of them stronger, not weaker." "Pretty speech," Victor sneered. "But words won't save him." "You're right. Words won't save him." I met Dominic's eyes, seeing surprise and something that looked like pride. "His own strength will save him. The strength to choose partnership over isolation. The strength to believe that different doesn't mean lesser. The strength to trust that vulnerability can be power, if you're brave enough to show it." I turned back to Victor. "That's why you'll lose today. Not because Dominic is physically stronger, though he is, but because he understands something you never will. True strength isn't about standing alone. It's about knowing when to stand together." The arena had gone silent. Every eye was on me. Fragile human woman lecturing an alpha about strength. It was absurd, audacious, possibly suicidal, but I saw it working. Saw doubt flicker across Victor's face. Saw the crowd shifting, murmuring, reconsidering. Saw Dominic straighten, something rekindling in his eyes. Victor roared and charged, not at Dominic, but at me. Everything happened at once. Jackson yanked me backward, guards rushed forward, and Dominic moved faster than I'd seen him move all fight, intercepting Victor mid-leap with devastating force. They went down in a tangle of violence, but this time it was different. This time, Dominic fought not just with strength, but with purpose. Every blow was precise, calculated, unstoppable. Within moments, he had Victor pinned, one hand around his throat, claws extended. "Yield," Dominic growled. Victor struggled, pride warring with survival instinct. The crowd held its breath. "Yield," Dominic repeated. "Or die, your choice." Finally, grudgingly, Victor tapped twice against the ground. Submission. The crowd erupted. Dominic held position a moment longer, making sure the yield was genuine, then released Victor and stood. Blood dripped from a dozen wounds, but he moved like a king reclaiming his throne. His eyes found mine across the arena, and the look in them made my heart stop. Relief, triumph, and something deeper that I didn't have a name for yet. The weeks that followed were a blur of healing and change. Dominic recovered with the accelerated healing of his kind, though Margot insisted on bed rest that he chafed against. Victor had slunk back to his territory, humiliated but alive, no longer a threat. And I began to find my place. It wasn't easy. Evangeline still opposed me at every council meeting, though her arguments had lost their edge. But others, Miriam, Jackson, Thomas, even some who'd been skeptical initially, began to treat me not as an interloper, but as their Luna. I still made mistakes, still felt overwhelmed, still woke some mornings convinced I wasn't enough. But Dominic was always there, patient and proud, reminding me that queens weren't born. They were built, one choice at a time. 6 months after waking up in a castle with a ring on my finger, I stood in the same arena where Dominic had fought for his throne. But today wasn't about violence. Today was about celebration. The Harvest Festival, where all packs gathered to mark the season's end. I wore the midnight blue dress again, but this time I'd added my grandmother's compass over it, displayed proudly. a symbol of where I'd come from and how far I'd traveled. Dominic stood beside me as the festivities began, his hand finding mine. The ring on my finger had become familiar now, its weight comforting rather than confining. Any regrets? He asked quietly. I thought about everything, the fear, the challenges, the moments I'd wanted to run. But I thought too about Thomas calling me his angel, about Margot braiding my hair with gentle hands, about the first time the council had voted in my favor, about Dominic's smile when I said something clever, the way he listened when I spoke, how he'd trusted me to become something neither of us could have predicted. Not one, I said truthfully. He lifted our joined hands and pressed a kiss to my knuckles, the same gesture from months ago, but meaning something different now. Not a promise, but an acknowledgement. We'd built something real from impossible circumstances. I love you, he said. The words quiet but certain. I don't know when it happened. Maybe that first night in the library. Maybe when you stood before Victor and lectured him on strength. But Clara, you're not just my wife or my queen. You're my partner, my equal, my choice, every single day. Tears pricked my eyes, but I smiled through them. I love you too, and I choose you. Every day. The crowd cheered as we kissed, sealing not just our love, but our reign. Luna Queen and Alpha King, human and wolf, different but unified. I'd woken up in a castle with a ring on my finger and a life I didn't choose. But I'd stayed, fought, learned, and grown into someone I barely recognized. Someone visible. Someone chosen. Someone who chose herself, finally, after years of hiding. The only way out had been through, and through had led me exactly where I belonged. Home.